The rain came down in sheets, hammering the windshield so hard that even the wipers couldn't keep up. Lady Amelia Blackwood gripped the steering wheel, knuckles white, as her old Land Rover bounced along the narrow road winding through the Yorkshire Dales. Headlights cut through the darkness, illuminating ancient stone walls and tangled hedgerows, the wild moor stretching out on either side. She pressed her foot on the gas, desperate to outrun the storm in her heart. Her thoughts spun in circles. London, the courtroom, her ex-husband's cold eyes, the hollow ache of signing the divorce papers. She was leaving all that behind, wasn't she? Or maybe it was following her, lurking somewhere in the mist and rain, refusing to let her go. Every mile she drove away from the city, she felt lighter, but every memory weighed her down again. Suddenly, a flash of white darted across the road. Amelia slammed the brakes, tires skidded, the Land Rover fishtailed, then stopped with a jolt. Heart pounding, she peered through the rain-soaked glass. There, illuminated in the high beams, stood a small herd of deer, but not just any deer. Her breath caught. These were white fallow deer, rare and ghost-like, their coats gleaming against the gloom. At the center, a delicate fawn, legs trembling, stared at her with wide, liquid eyes. She barely had time to marvel before another pair of headlights appeared, coming fast around the bend. A massive lorry roared towards the herd, its logo unmistakable. Fletcher Estates. Amelia's instincts took over. She flung open the car door, rain slapping her face as she sprinted into the road, arms waving. "Stop!" she yelled, the wind tearing at her voice. The lorry screeched, brakes squealing, missing the fawn by inches. The herd scattered into the brush, but the little one froze, legs buckling. Without thinking, Amelia scooped it up, feeling its frantic heartbeat against her chest. Mud soaked her jeans, the cold biting through her coat, but she barely noticed. The lorry's door banged open. A man in an expensive rain jacket climbed down, umbrella snapping in the wind. His hair was slicked back, face pale in the headlights. Marcus Fletcher, the so-called visionary developer from London. His eyes swept over Amelia, then landed on the fawn in her arms. "You shouldn't be out here, Lady Blackwood. That animal's not your responsibility," he said, voice smooth but cold. Amelia met his gaze, defiant. "You almost killed a protected species," she shot back. "What the hell are you doing barreling through here with construction trucks?" Marcus smirked, gesturing to the logo on his lorry. "We're on a timeline," he said. "The new eco-resort opens next year. Progress, Lady Blackwood. Surely you've heard of it." "Progress," she echoed. "Looks an awful lot like destruction out here." He laughed. "The locals will thank me. Jobs, money, green tourism, this is the future. You of all people should know, living in that dusty old manor, that nothing lasts forever." "This land survived centuries," Amelia replied, anger rising. "It doesn't need you to save it, or to sell it off piece by piece." As thunder cracked overhead, Marcus pulled out his phone, aiming it at her and the deer. "Smile for the camera. The internet loves a dramatic animal rescue," he mocked. Amelia turned her back, shielding the fawn from the light. In that moment, she saw other lorries lined up behind his, each loaded with construction gear. Men in neon vests watched the confrontation, some smirking, others glancing away, uneasy. "Call the police if you want," Marcus said. "But we have permits. You can't stop progress." Amelia squared her shoulders, letting the rain pour down her face. "I'll do more than call the police," she said. "You've just endangered protected wildlife." This is a violation of the Wildlife and Countryside Act. He raised an eyebrow. You'd have to prove it, he replied. And last I checked, the courts in Yorkshire care more about jobs than deer. The word jobs rang hollow. Amelia looked past Marcus to the fields beyond, remembering the stories her grandmother told her. Tales of ancient spirits in the trees, of a time when these woods belonged to no one and everyone at once. Not a commodity, not a marketing tool. She pulled out her own phone, snapping photos of the fawn, the tire marks, the lorries, every detail. Marcus narrowed his eyes. If you post that, you'll hear from my lawyers. I don't need to post it, Amelia said quietly. I know the right people. She gently placed the fawn down, guiding it back toward the bramble. The rain softened. From the hedgerow, the rest of the herd watched, eyes glowing. Amelia felt a sudden surge of determination. The land was speaking, asking for a champion. For the first time in months, she felt a purpose rising in her chest, burning brighter than fear or regret. As Marcus climbed back into his lorry, he called out, "You can't fight the future, Lady Blackwood. This is my land now." Amelia watched the trucks rumble off into the storm, taillights vanishing into the dark. She knelt in the mud, raindrops mingling with tears she didn't even realize were falling. But as the deer melted back into the forest and the thunder rolled away, she made a promise to herself, right there on the wind-swept road. She would not let this place, or its wild, untamed magic, disappear without a fight. The storm raged through the night, drumming against the old manor's leaded windows as Amelia sat alone in the parlor, a mug of untouched tea cooling in her hands. Shadows flickered from the fireplace, but her mind wasn't on the warmth or the glow. It replayed the image of the white fawn, trembling in her arms, and Marcus Fletcher's smirk as his convoy rumbled into the darkness. She couldn't sleep, not while the fate of the forest, her family's legacy, hung by a thread. Sometime after midnight, when the storm eased to a heavy drizzle, Amelia pulled on her boots, grabbed her camera and a waterproof coat, and slipped outside. The wet gravel crunched beneath her steps as she crossed the estate grounds, weaving through the tangled hedges until the boundary between garden and wild forest blurred. Beyond the crumbling stone wall, the trees closed in, thick with mist, their branches reaching like arms in the dark. She moved quickly, guided by the half-moon and her memory of the deer's path. Her heart thudded in her ears, each snap of a twig making her flinch. Was she foolish, wandering alone? Maybe. But she was used to solitude. Besides, she told herself, it wasn't fear she felt, it was resolve. Inside the forest, the scent of damp earth and crushed leaves filled the air. She paused every so often, listening for the soft, delicate sounds of wildlife. There, a rustle to her left. She crouched low, easing the camera from her bag. Through the lens, she glimpsed a flicker of white. The herd was close, their bodies ghost-like under the canopy, breath steaming in the chill air. The fawn was there, nestled against its mother, a fresh wound visible on its haunch, red against pale fur. Amelia's hands shook, but she pressed the shutter, click, 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 capturing the evidence. These images, she knew, could make all the difference. Proof that the construction threatened a protected species. Proof that Fletcher's eco-resort was nothing but a sham. She whispered encouragement to the deer, quietly moving to a better vantage point. Suddenly, a harsh beam of light sliced through the trees. Voices echoed, male, brash, unmistakably out of place in this ancient quiet. "Who's there?" barked a voice, sharp and arrogant. She froze, heart in her throat. Footsteps crunched on the undergrowth. The flashlight swung, illuminating her face. Well, well, if it isn't Lady Blackwood. Out for a midnight stroll. Marcus Fletcher stepped into view, a pair of security men flanking him. His smile was all teeth and contempt. Amelia straightened, hiding her fear behind cold fury. "I'm documenting wildlife," she said. "You're trespassing on National Trust land after hours." He snorted. "Is that so? Because from where I stand, it looks like you're the one sneaking around, taking photos on private property. I could have you arrested for trespassing, you know." "Go ahead," she shot back, "and explain to the police why your equipment is running over protected deer." Fletcher's smile faded. "Don't play games with me," he said, stepping closer. "You're not in London now. Out here, people want jobs, not fairy tales about endangered animals." She held up her camera, defiant. "I have all the proof I need. This will go to the authorities, and the press if I have to." He took a menacing step forward. "If you publish a single photo, I'll sue you for defamation and invasion of privacy. I have lawyers on retainer, Lady Blackwood. City lawyers. The kind that win." A tense silence crackled between them. The security men shifted uneasily, glancing at each other. One of them, a local by his accent, muttered, "Maybe we should just let her be, boss." "No harm done," Marcus snapped. "Quiet, I don't pay you to think." Turning back to Amelia, he tried to soften his tone. "Look, I get it. You care about the place. But progress is inevitable. If you cooperate, maybe there's a place for you on my team. PR, conservation advisor, whatever title you want. It's better than fighting a losing battle." Amelia stared at him, rain dripping from her hair. "I'd rather lose than help you ruin this place." His expression twisted. Without warning, he raised his phone and began filming, sweeping the light from his flashlight dramatically across her face and the forest. "See this, everyone?" he intoned, voice theatrical. "Here's Lady Blackwood, trespassing, spreading lies about Fletcher estates, endangering local jobs for her own selfish nostalgia. People like her are what's holding Yorkshire back." He uploaded the video right then, thumbing at his screen, grinning like a predator. Within moments, his followers began to comment. Amelia could hear her phone buzzing in her pocket, notifications exploding, accusations, mockery. The internet could be cruel and fast. But before Marcus could gloat, a sudden crash echoed from deeper in the woods. The deer scattered in panic. Amelia spun, catching a glimpse of the fawn struggling to run, its wound reopened by fright. Pain ripped through her. She wanted to scream, to shove Marcus and his men out of the forest. Instead, she forced herself to focus, snapping more pictures as evidence. Fletcher stepped forward, his voice lower, threatening. "This is your last warning. Stay out of my way, or you'll regret it." She didn't respond. The fawn limped off into the dark. For a moment the woods seemed to close in, thick and suffocating, the ancient trees holding their breath. Amelia watched Fletcher's men march back to the lorries, their laughter echoing through the night. As soon as they were gone, Amelia knelt beside the blood-stained leaves, tears stinging her eyes. "I'm not giving up. Not for anything." She looked up, a new resolve hardening in her chest. If it took every ounce of strength, every last connection she had, she would fight for the forest, for the deer, for her family's name. No threat, no smear campaign would stop her now. She wiped her eyes, cradled her camera, and slipped through the shadows, the future uncertain, but her purpose, at last, crystal clear. The grey dawn crept over the Yorkshire Dales, spreading cool, watery light across Lady Amelia Blackwood's family estate. After a sleepless night, she stood by the frost-streaked window, gazing out at the rolling hills where the forest met the pastures. Mist hovered over the moors, softening the jagged landscape. Even after all these years, Yorkshire still felt like a place out of time, ancient, patient, and full of secrets. Downstairs, the old house was coming to life. Somewhere in the kitchen, Mrs. Denby, the longtime housekeeper, hummed to herself as she prepared breakfast. The aroma of frying eggs and fresh-baked bread drifted up the stairwell. For the first time in weeks, Amelia let herself breathe. She hadn't expected to return to this house, the place of her childhood joys and teenage heartbreaks, but now it felt like the only solid ground beneath her feet. She dressed quickly, pulling on jeans and an old Barber jacket, her boots still muddy from the night before. On the mantel, her camera sat beside a stack of field notebooks, the evidence she'd gathered carefully locked away. She ran a hand over the leather cover, remembering the look in Fletcher's eyes as he threatened her. The threat felt real, even here among her ancestors' portraits and faded wallpaper. But she refused to be intimidated. In the kitchen, Mrs. Denby poured her tea and clucked her tongue. "You look like you've been out chasing ghosts again, Lady Amelia." Amelia smiled, the sound of the woman's Yorkshire accent oddly soothing. "I might have been," she said. "It's good to be home, Mrs. Denby." "Aye, it's not London, but it's ours," the housekeeper replied, patting her hand. "You eat now. You'll need your strength." Amelia ate quickly, then stepped out into the cold morning air. The forest glistened, every leaf shining with last night's rain. She walked the boundary of the estate, the camera slung around her neck, trying to spot the white deer. With each step, she remembered childhood games, her father teaching her to read animal tracks, her mother's laughter echoing through the woods. Those memories felt distant now, worn thin by grief and the wreckage of her marriage. At the edge of the property, she found Sir Reginald Hawthorne waiting for her. He stood tall in his tweed coat, a cane in one hand, and an old shepherd dog at his feet. Reginald looked every bit the country gentleman, but his eyes were sharp and full of humor. "There you are, Amelia. I thought you'd run off again." "I almost did," she admitted, forcing a half-smile. "But I suppose Yorkshire has its hooks in me." Reginald's laugh was warm. "You always were stubborn. Your father was the same." They walked together along the footpath, the morning dew soaking their boots. The talk turned to old times, the parties in the grand hall, riding out across the moors, the fierce pride that came with being a Blackwood. But beneath the nostalgia was something heavier. Reginald stopped and turned to her. "I heard about last night," he said softly. "Fletcher's truck's on the road. You stopping them? It's already making the rounds in the village." Amelia shook her head. "I'm not looking for trouble, Reginald. But he's going to destroy this place. The deer, the woods, all of it." "He'll try," Reginald replied. "But you're not alone, Amelia. There are more people here who care than you think." She hesitated, her guard slipping for just a moment. "I don't know if I'm strong enough to fight him, not after everything that happened in London. The divorce, the lawyers. I'm tired, Reginald." He put a hand on her shoulder. "That's why you came home, to remember what you're fighting for. The Blackwoods have always stood for something more than money." His words settled inside her like a spark. For a moment, the pain of the past eased. They wandered back toward the manor, pausing to watch a pair of barn owls gliding low over the meadow. Reginald told her about the National Trust's plans to rewild parts of the estate and how the local schoolchildren came every spring to plant new trees. Amelia felt hope flicker inside her, a sense that maybe, just maybe, the land could heal. The rest of the day passed in small, gentle moments. Amelia catalogued her photos, logging the positions of the deer, noting the signs of damage where the trucks had passed. She called the regional office of the National Trust, careful not to mention the exact location of the herd. Protecting the deer meant keeping them a secret, even from the people who were supposed to help. Later, as twilight gathered, she sat by the fire with Reginald and Mrs. Denby, sipping hot tea and listening to the wind whistle down the chimney. They talked of village news, a local pub changing hands, a new teacher at the primary school, the harvest festival planned for October. Amelia felt the rhythm of Yorkshire life pulling her back in, steady, familiar, comforting. But under the warmth, a quiet anxiety lingered. Her phone buzzed with notifications, news stories spreading about the heiress fighting progress, trolls attacking her on social media, strangers demanding she let the future in. She tried to ignore it, but every message was a fresh cut. Reginald noticed her frown. "Don't let them get to you," he said gently. "There will always be people who want what's easy, not what's right." "I know," Amelia replied quietly. "But sometimes I wonder if I'm fighting a losing battle." Mrs. Denby shook her head. "We don't give up in Yorkshire, love. Never have, never will." Amelia smiled, for tonight she let herself believe it. Outside, the wind carried the scent of earth and wood smoke. Somewhere deep in the forest, the white deer moved through the shadows, silent and unseen. Amelia closed her eyes and listened, willing herself to be brave, if not for herself, then for the land and for the generations that came before her. Whatever happened next, she would be ready. Amelia stared at her laptop, the blue glow painting lines of exhaustion across her face. Sunlight filtered through the old manor's windows, splintering across stacks of conservation paperwork, field guides, and camera equipment scattered over the dining table. Somewhere in the background, the slow ticking of the grandfather clock marked time in a house that always seemed both too large and too quiet for one person. The world outside was changing fast, and sometimes Amelia felt like she was standing still while everything else sped past her. She checked the latest emails from the National Trust. Grant money was in question, again. In her effort to protect the herd of white deer, Amelia had been sending in vague and incomplete field reports, omitting the exact locations and failing to disclose full counts of the herd. The lies weighed heavy, but she couldn't bring herself to reveal the secret, not with developers and social media influencers prowling for a story. Still, every delayed or partial report made the trust uneasy. Now, one curt message asked her to justify the lack of verifiable progress. The threat was clear. No results. No funding. Her phone vibrated. She let it go to voicemail, knowing who it would be. Her ex-husband, most likely calling with some new legal demand. Since the divorce, he'd made it his mission to remind her that the Blackwood estate was part of their shared assets. His voice, once gentle, now arrived only as a blade. "If you're going to play at being a country heroine, you should at least turn a profit." She deleted the message without listening. Some wounds were better left unopened. Seeking solace, she left the house, walking the boundary line where estate met wild. Her boots crunched through last year's leaves, her breath hanging in the crisp air. She brought a battered notebook and a pen, jotting down her thoughts in the margins. Sometimes, writing in the open like this helped her see through the tangled questions and doubts. A gust of wind carried laughter from the village, children on their way to school, a delivery van backing up at the grocer's, the distant clang of the church bell. Life moved on, indifferent to city lawyers, greedy developers, or even the ancient titles that had once meant everything. Amelia envied the villagers' sense of belonging, their confidence that the land was theirs and always would be. She paused at the community notice board near the village green. There was a flyer for a fundraising bake sale, a hand-painted sign for the pub's trivia night, and a poem from one of the school children. Keep our woods wild. Back at home, she leafed through old family journals, looking for inspiration and courage. Her grandmother had kept meticulous notes about the land, from migration patterns to wildflowers in spring. One entry caught her eye. To protect something, you must sometimes keep it secret, even from your friends. Amelia closed the journal, feeling the years pressing down on her. That afternoon, she attended a quiet meeting at the local schoolhouse, where teachers, farmers, and small business owners discussed the latest rumor about Fletcher's project. The air was thick with worry. Some feared rising property taxes and the influx of city tourists. Others wondered if they'd lose their jobs if the old ways were swept aside. Amelia listened quietly, heart aching at their anxiety. She stood when it was her turn, her voice calm but steady. I know the world outside is changing, and I know we all need to make a living. But once these woods are gone, they're gone forever. If we want our children to know what it means to belong here, we have to protect what's left. Some nodded in agreement. Others stared at their hands. Amelia felt the tension in the room, people caught between loyalty to tradition and the seductive promise of new money. Sir Reginald spoke after her, his words gentle but forceful. Her family has cared for these lands for centuries, he said. If anyone knows what's at stake, it's Amelia. The meeting broke up with no clear plan, but a sense of unity lingered, like the smell of wood smoke on a cold night. As Amelia walked home, she felt a little lighter, bolstered by Reginald's support and the quiet, stubborn hope of the village. Later, alone in her study, she opened her diary and began to write, not the cold language of grant applications, but her true thoughts, about the fawn's frightened eyes, about the ache of loss and the weight of responsibility. She wrote about her fear of failure and her desperate wish to do right by her family, the villagers, and the land itself. Outside, rain began to fall softly. She watched it bead on the window pane, grateful for the comfort of the old house. The manor's stones held warmth from generations past. The fire in the hearth crackled, casting gold across the pages of her journal. As dusk settled, Reginald stopped by with news from the parish council. Over mugs of strong tea, they talked strategy. How to rally more of the village. How to keep Fletcher's lobbyists at bay. How to buy time. Reginald handed her an envelope. Anonymous tips about environmental violations on the construction site. Something they might use in the coming fight. The conversation turned gentle as the night grew late. Reginald spoke about his late wife, about grief and second chances. Amelia opened up about her divorce, her loneliness, and the relief she felt when the land seemed to answer back. Their stories braided together, old wounds easing in the comfort of shared experience. Before bed, Amelia walked the darkened halls of the manor, fingers trailing across old portraits and faded tapestries. She paused at the front window, watching the rain blur the lights of the village. Somewhere in the woods, she knew, the white deer moved under the trees, quiet, hidden, resilient. Amelia made a silent promise. She would keep fighting for herself and for all of them. Whatever storms came next, she would face them with the stubborn grace of the Dales, heart open, eyes clear, and hope renewed. The next Saturday, the peace of the Yorkshire countryside shattered before sunrise. A caravan of glossy SUVs and rumbling vans snaked through the narrow village streets, leaving muddy tire tracks on the cobblestones and sending chickens and dogs scattering. At the edge of the forest, shiny rental cars disgorged clusters of visitors in designer rain boots and neon hiking jackets. Some had expensive cameras slung around their necks. Others brandished smartphones, selfie sticks, and branded water bottles. The only thing louder than their chatter was the click and whir of devices capturing everything. Amelia watched from behind a thicket, heart thumping with dread. She recognized Olivia Grant instantly, the influencer from Manchester, whose online presence was as relentless as Fletcher's bulldozers. Olivia's blonde hair gleamed under a bright pink beanie as she set up her tripod, gesturing at her phone while her videographer fiddled with a drone. Within moments, the sound of buzzing wings joined the cacophony, and the little machine zipped overhead, swooping low above the trees and startling birds from their nests. "Morning, nature lovers," Olivia called into the camera, her voice syrupy, sweet, yet perfectly calculated. "We're here in the legendary Yorkshire Dales, searching for the rare, magical white deer. Make sure to like and subscribe if you want to see more hidden gems." Behind her, a growing crowd gathered, fueled by social media posts and hashtags. Some stomped through the undergrowth, snapping branches and trampling delicate wildflowers for a better angle. A group of teenagers tried to creep up on a family of deer, one tossing bits of sandwich crust in a misguided attempt to lure them closer. Others left behind trail mix wrappers and plastic bottles, oblivious or unconcerned. Fletcher had promised ecotourism. What Amelia saw was chaos. Instead of hushed reverence, there was shouting, laughter, and the blaring of pop music from someone's portable speaker. She bit her lip, fists clenched in her jacket pockets. In all her years walking these woods, she had never felt such a sense of violation, not even during the worst storms. Nearby, a mother scolded her child for running too fast, but when the little girl pointed excitedly at a flash of white in the shadows, half the crowd surged toward it, cameras held aloft. The deer, cornered and terrified, bolted through the brambles, their white coats making them easy targets for lenses and the drone alike. Amelia snapped photos of the frenzy, jaw tight with fury. She watched a young buck, wide-eyed and bleeding from a scratch, stumble into a ditch as a pack of hikers crowded in for a closer look. She called out, her voice sharp, "Please, stay back! You're scaring the animals!" A few people turned, annoyed at the interruption, but Olivia only smiled wider, waving to her followers. "Don't worry, folks. We're being careful. All for conservation, right? We want to inspire people to care." Amelia felt the words like poison. She moved quickly, ducking behind trees, cataloging the damage. Flattened grass, broken ferns, litter everywhere. It wasn't just the deer in danger now. Birds had abandoned their nests, and the fragile ground cover was torn apart by 100 careless feet. She tried to talk sense to Olivia, cornering her as the influencer checked her makeup between takes. "You need to stop this," Amelia said, keeping her voice low and firm. "These woods can't handle this kind of traffic. You're putting the deer at risk. You're endangering the entire ecosystem." Olivia blinked, bemused. "I'm raising awareness. This is what people want to see. If anything, we're helping." By sending an army of strangers into a fragile habitat? Olivia shrugged. That's just how the world works now. You have to share if you want to save anything. Amelia could feel herself trembling, not with fear, but with frustration. There was nothing left to say. Olivia turned back to her phone, perfectly composed. Just then, Marcus Fletcher arrived at the edge of the clearing, flanked by several local officials and a small crew of construction managers. He wore a tailored field jacket and a broad, satisfied smile. His voice carried over the heads of the crowd. Welcome, everyone. This is what the New Yorkshire will look like. Accessible, lively, and open for all. Thanks to Olivia Grant for showing the world what we have to offer. There was a smattering of applause. One of the councilmen snapped photos with Marcus, the promise of progress sparkling in every handshake. Amelia stepped forward, fury rising. This isn't progress, it's destruction. You're destroying everything that makes this place special. Fletcher turned, his gaze cold. You're outnumbered, Lady Blackwood. The world's changing whether you like it or not. Best get used to it. The crowd surged after the next deer sighting. Amelia was jostled aside, nearly knocked over as more visitors arrived. The drone swooped so low that a stag reared and crashed through the brush, its antlers catching in a fence. She saw a tear in the animal's side, blood staining the grass. With shaking hands, she snapped more photos. Evidence, she told herself, even as it felt more like a funeral. Desperate, Amelia called Sir Reginald, voice tight with worry. They're ruining everything, she whispered. I need help. He promised to come at once, rallying anyone in the village who would listen. Amelia hung up, feeling small and powerless. She watched as Fletcher shook hands with Olivia for another photo op, the councilman smiling at the cameras, the hashtags already trending. In the distance, the herd vanished into the darkest part of the woods, leaving behind a scene of trampled earth and echoing laughter. Amelia pressed her palm to the bark of an ancient oak, grounding herself as she tried to quiet the anger and sorrow roaring in her chest. She would not let this be the end. She would fight for the forest, for the deer, and for the spirit of Yorkshire, even if she had to stand alone. Rain battered the slate roofs of the village as Amelia hurried down the high street, determination burning in her veins. The images from the weekend, bleeding deer, torn ground, plastic waste tangled in wildflowers, haunted her every step. She knew now that appealing to Fletcher's conscience or to the influencer's sense of decency was pointless. She needed to rally the village, fast, before the forest was gone for good. Inside the old church hall, the mood was tense and electric. Sir Reginald was already there, standing at the front, his cane tapping a restless rhythm against the wooden floorboards. Beside him sat Mrs. Denby, her stern face softening when Amelia entered, and a handful of farmers and teachers, eyes wary but curious. Amelia didn't waste time. She connected her camera to the projector, filling the blank wall with stark, undeniable images. A stag's side ripped open, fawns cowering near crumpled soda cans, wildflowers crushed under muddy footprints. Gasps and mutters rippled through the room. "They can't do this," one of the farmers exclaimed. Amelia nodded, her voice clear but trembling with emotion. Fletcher and his influencers are destroying the woods under the guise of ecotourism. The deer are fleeing deeper into the forest, and some may not survive. If we don't act, there won't be anything left for them, or us. A teacher spoke up, worry on her brow. But the council's already supporting Fletcher. He's promising jobs and tourism money. People are scared to speak out. Sir Reginald's voice cut through the uncertainty. We cannot let money blind us to what matters most. The Blackwood lands, and these woods, are part of all our lives. Our children deserve to see deer in the wild, not just on a screen. The crowd's mood shifted, anger and pride mingling. Mrs. Denby nodded in fierce agreement. If we don't fight now, there'll be nothing left for the next generation. Amelia felt a wave of gratitude. For the first time, she didn't feel alone. She outlined her plan, a peaceful protest at the main forest entrance, blocking Fletcher's trucks from entering. Sir Reginald offered to bring his own documentation, evidence of council bribes and violations he'd quietly collected over the years. By morning, the village was abuzz. Farmers brought tractors and livestock trailers to create a physical blockade. Shopkeepers hung handwritten signs in their windows, "Protect our forest," "No to fake green." Local children painted banners with owls and deer, and elders, many in patched coats, arrived with flasks of tea and sandwiches, ready for a long day. Fletcher's convoy rolled up just after dawn, headlights glaring in the early mist. His voice boomed over a bullhorn. "Clear the road. You're trespassing, and this is obstruction of business." Amelia stepped forward, heart pounding, rain dripping from her hair. She locked eyes with Fletcher, unwavering. "You're the one trespassing," she said. "This is a conservation area, and your activities are endangering protected species." Fletcher smirked, confident in his power. "That's for the council to decide, not a bunch of sentimental villagers." But Sir Reginald strode forward, holding up a thick folder. "I have documentation of illegal dumping, violations of planning permission, and evidence of bribes to the council," he announced, his voice carrying down the line of villagers. "If you don't leave, this goes straight to the authorities and the local press." A murmur of excitement rippled through the crowd. TV cameras from a local news station appeared, drawn by word of the standoff. Reporters began interviewing villagers, some of whom hadn't spoken out before, but now found their voices. Olivia Grant, always ready for an audience, live-streamed the confrontation to her followers, hoping to paint herself as a champion of accessible nature. But her stream quickly turned against her, comments flooding in as viewers saw the damage for themselves. The standoff escalated. Fletcher called the police, demanding that Amelia and the others be arrested. Blue lights flashed as officers arrived, faces tired and wary. Amelia's heart hammered in her chest as Fletcher accused her of inciting a riot, calling her a stubborn relic clinging to the past. The lead officer, a local, familiar with Amelia's family, listened quietly as she laid out the situation. She handed over the photos and Reginald's evidence, voice steady. "We're not rioters. We're here to protect the environment as the law demands. I urge you to check the evidence before taking any action." The officer took the documents, glancing at Fletcher with a raised brow. "This isn't the first complaint we've had about your project, Mr. Fletcher. We'll need to investigate before you continue." For the first time, Fletcher faltered, his bravado slipping. The crowd sensed the shift, cheers rising as the police began documenting the scene, measuring tire tracks, photographing damage. News crews broadcast live, amplifying the protest across the region. Amelia felt hope ignite in her chest. They had stood their ground, and now the world was watching. As the rain slowed, villagers shared sandwiches and tea, singing folk songs and telling stories of the woods. Children played near the barricades, watched over by parents and grandparents, all united in a way Amelia had never seen before. Late in the afternoon, as Fletcher and his crew retreated, Sir Reginald put a hand on Amelia's shoulder. "You've started something bigger than you know," he said quietly. "They'll fight back, but you've awakened the heart of this place." Amelia looked out over the fields and forest, the banners fluttering in the breeze. For a moment, she let herself believe that the land could still be saved, that together they were stronger than the forces trying to tear it apart. But she also knew the fight was far from over. As the day faded and villagers drifted home, Amelia lingered at the edge of the forest, rain-soaked and exhausted, but more determined than ever. The first battle had been won. The war for Yorkshire's soul was just beginning. The days that followed the protest blurred into one another, each filled with uncertainty, tension, and the ceaseless hum of online debate. Amelia woke every morning to dozens of notifications, some messages of support, others full of anger or mockery. The local papers printed headlines about the battle for Yorkshire's soul. News vans parked in the village, their satellite dishes angled like alien eyes toward the manor and the ancient woods beyond. And through it all, the forest waited, battered but unbowed, the white deer growing ever more elusive in the deepening thickets. Amelia spent most days on the phone, fielding questions from journalists, rallying the villagers, and scrambling to gather more evidence of Fletcher's violations. Each time she walked the property, her camera became both shield and weapon, documenting everything from deep tire ruts to broken bird nests and the ever-present traces of deer, tracks pressed into the soft earth, tufts of white fur caught on thorns, a flash of movement in the shadows. Sometimes at dusk, she glimpsed the fawn she had rescued, its limp slightly improved, but never completely gone. One gray morning, a new ally arrived. Dr. Thomas Langley from the Royal Society for the Protection of Birds stepped out of a battered blue hatchback, muddy boots and field jacket marking him as a man who belonged in wild places. He shook Amelia's hand firmly, then listened intently as she laid out the situation. Thomas wasted no time, striding through the woods with binoculars slung around his neck, jotting notes in a battered field journal. By mid-afternoon, he had compiled a damning list of infractions: unlicensed vehicle access, disturbance of breeding sites, and violations of both local and national wildlife protection laws. "You have a case," Thomas said, squinting at her over his glasses. "And if Fletcher thinks he can buy his way out, he's underestimated both you and the law." For the first time in weeks, hope felt like something solid beneath Amelia's feet. That hope only grew when Thomas agreed to serve as an expert witness in the pending legal challenge. Together, they pored over maps, photographs, and the pile of reports Reginald had provided. Amelia hardly slept, pushing herself to assemble everything the solicitor would need. But as the case gained momentum, Amelia's personal world threatened to collapse. One evening, as the last of the light faded and she was closing her laptop, there was a sharp knock at the manor door. She opened it to find her ex-husband, Daniel, standing on the stoop. He looked every inch the successful London financier, tailored suit, expensive haircut, a phone glued to his hand. Rain dripped from his umbrella, pooling around his leather shoes. "Amelia," he said, voice smooth and cool, "we need to talk." She stepped aside, jaw set as he entered the hall. His eyes swept over the old house, taking in the stacks of paperwork and half-unpacked moving boxes. "Still playing country squire, I see," he remarked, only half joking. "What do you want, Daniel?" Amelia asked, folding her arms. He held up a sheaf of documents, the edges bristling with legal tabs. "My lawyers have filed to claim my share of the estate. Your activism is making headlines, and the property's value is in question. Unless you settle, soon, I'll push for a full sale. That means everything. The manor, the woods, All of it. The words hit her like a blow. For a moment, she couldn't breathe. She gripped the back of a chair, anger and panic warring in her chest. "You never cared about this place," she managed. "Not once." He shrugged. "I care about what's mine. And if you're going to risk it all for some deer and a few trees, I want my cut." 1,000 retorts died on her tongue. She forced herself to speak, each word like broken glass. "You're not taking this from me. Not now." He smiled, cold and knowing. "We'll see. My lawyers will be in touch." He left as quickly as he had come, the door slamming behind him. Amelia sank onto the stairs, the old house creaking around her. For a long moment, she wept, quietly, fiercely, the way she had not since the divorce. But then she wiped her eyes, set her jaw, and returned to her desk. If Daniel wanted a fight, he'd get one. She would not let personal ruin deter her, not with so much at stake. The next morning, she met with her solicitor, laying out the new threat. Reginald joined them, his presence steady and reassuring. They devised a strategy. Daniel's claim might delay the proceedings, but it also opened the door for a countersuit, leveraging the estate's conservation status and public support. Thomas agreed to testify not only to the environmental damage, but to the unique cultural and historic value of the land. As legal filings flew back and forth, Fletcher's construction ground to a halt. The court issued an injunction forbidding any work until the case could be resolved. Olivia Grant's online presence soured. Even her followers began to question the project as photos of injured wildlife flooded social media. Public opinion shifted. Local politicians, sensing the tide, backed away from Fletcher's campaign, issuing statements about listening to the people and protecting Yorkshire's heritage. But victory came at a cost. The white deer vanished deeper into the woods. Fewer tracks appeared by the stream, and on some mornings, Amelia feared they were gone for good. Still, she refused to give in to despair. Late one night, unable to sleep, she walked the boundaries of the estate, lantern in hand. She paused at the edge of the forest, listening to the wind in the trees. A twig snapped. Out of the darkness stepped the wounded fawn, now grown, its eyes steady and unafraid. Amelia knelt, reaching out a trembling hand. The deer sniffed her fingers, then melted back into the shadows, silent, but not alone. She straightened, hope swelling in her chest. The fight was far from over, but in that moment, under the ancient Yorkshire stars, she knew she would not back down. By dawn, the tension in Yorkshire hung heavier than the morning fog. News of the court's injunction against Fletcher's construction had rippled through every lane and farmstead. Some villagers greeted Amelia with cautious optimism. Others worried that the fight was only half won and might bring trouble to their doors. But most, especially those who remembered the wild country before the eco-tourists and developers arrived, stood a little straighter, as if a hidden pride had awakened inside them. The day began with a steady stream of people making their way toward the old forest entrance, each one carrying a piece of the community's story. A thermos of strong tea, a homemade sign, a hand-sewn banner, a battered walking stick. Amelia, boots muddied and coat zipped tight against the wind, was among the first to arrive. She watched the sunrise bleed orange and gold through the branches, the old oaks standing sentinel, as they had for centuries. Sir Reginald was there, cane in hand and dignity unbent, greeting villagers by name and steadying nerves with dry humor. Even Mrs. Denby, usually reserved for kitchens and family affairs, showed up carrying a tray of her famous scones, wrapped in a blue tea towel. Amelia caught her eye and smiled, heart swelling at the quiet force of this place. More people gathered as the morning advanced. Teachers, farmers, shopkeepers, the local vicar, teenagers with painted faces, grandparents in tweed, all drawn together by something more powerful than anger or fear, the determination not to let their home be bulldozed into another resort. Some brought instruments, and soon the protest swelled with old Yorkshire folk songs, the voices carrying into the deep woods. At 9 sharp, the first construction truck rumbled down the lane, followed by a convoy of contractors and officials. Fletcher's car brought up the rear, his jaw clenched, his gaze icy. He stepped out and strode forward, flanked by Olivia Grant, her camera already rolling, hoping to spin the event for her followers. "Move aside," Fletcher barked, his voice echoing over the gathered crowd. "We have legal rights to proceed. You're obstructing business and violating the injunction." Sir Reginald stepped forward, unflinching. "The court said no such thing," he replied, voice ringing clear. "There's a stay on all construction pending investigation. You know it as well as I do." Fletcher sneered. "You're playing with fire, old man. This is bigger than you think." A rumble of voices rose from the villagers, not angry, but resolute. "This land's not for sale," someone shouted. "Go back to London," called another. Olivia panned her camera across the crowd, trying to capture something scandalous, but only found faces set with quiet purpose. Even a few of her online followers commented, "Leave the deer alone!" and "Protect the Dales!" Undeterred, she tried to interview Amelia. "Lady Blackwood, how does it feel to be at the center of all this chaos? Don't you worry about the jobs this project would bring?" Amelia steadied herself, then answered for all to hear. "Jobs don't mean anything if we have no land left to call home. This place isn't just a backdrop for your next video. It's our heritage. Our duty is to protect it, not sell it to the highest bidder." A ripple of applause broke out, villagers nodding in agreement. Even the local police, summoned to monitor the situation, hung back, unwilling to escalate unless truly necessary. Then, in a gesture born of desperation and courage, the villagers linked arms across the old lane, forming a human barrier between the trucks and the woods. Children clung to their parents' hands, teenagers raised hand-painted banners, and elders sang hymns that had echoed across these hills for generations. Fletcher's patience snapped. He stormed forward, threatening lawsuits and damages, swearing the villagers would regret their defiance. But the unity of the crowd was immovable. Even some of Fletcher's own workers hesitated, unwilling to drive through such a line. The standoff stretched for hours. News crews arrived, broadcasting live. Drone footage showed the human chain encircling the ancient trees, more powerful than any fence. Olivia's live stream began to backfire. Her attempts to paint the villagers as backward or selfish met with ridicule and disbelief from her own viewers. Finally, as the sun climbed high, Fletcher made a call, pacing furiously by his car. He shot Amelia a withering glare. "This isn't over. You're making a mistake you'll all pay for." But the villagers only closed ranks tighter. Reginald shook his head, his voice just loud enough for Fletcher to hear. The only mistake would be giving up. At last, unable to proceed without a riot, Fletcher ordered his trucks to retreat. Engines revved, gears ground, and one by one the vehicles backed down the lane, defeated for now. A collective sigh swept through the crowd, relief mixed with the knowledge that the threat wasn't truly gone. When the last truck disappeared, the villagers erupted in cheers, hugging and laughing, tears in many eyes. Amelia found herself surrounded by friends and strangers alike, all offering gratitude and promises of help. Mrs. Denby pressed a scone into her hand, grinning fiercely. "We did it, love. At least for today," but even in victory, tension lingered. Fletcher's words hung in the air, a promise of trouble to come. Some whispered of lawyers, others of political pressure from London. Amelia met Reginald's eyes, and in that silent moment, they understood each other. This was a battle won, not the war. That night, as stars pricked the sky above the dark woods, Amelia stood at her window, listening to the distant chorus of nightbirds. The forest felt a little safer, the air a little lighter. But she knew, deep down, that their unity would be tested again. Still, as she watched the moonlight silver the grass, she allowed herself, for one precious moment, to believe in hope. The village slept soundly that night, tired from triumph, yet Amelia lay awake, her mind teeming with thoughts. The victory at the forest entrance felt real, but in the hours that followed, something else took root inside her, a quiet anxiety that refused to let her rest. She rose long before dawn, pulled on her coat and boots, and stepped out into the garden. The world hushed except for the low rustle of wind through old trees. She walked the edge of the woods, lantern swinging at her side, the darkness pressing in close. For weeks she had fought tooth and nail to keep Fletcher and his ilk at bay, driven by anger and a fierce, almost desperate love for her home. But now, in the hush before sunrise, Amelia felt the weight of everything she had tried to protect. In the first pale light, she found deer tracks pressed deep into the mud, a trail leading away from the fields, farther into the thickets where no human paths dared to go. For a long moment she knelt beside them, her breath fogging in the chilly air. Not long ago, the white deer had grazed near her doorstep, barely afraid. Now they were gone, lost to the silent, unspoiled heart of the woods. She understood, suddenly and sharply, that victory did not always mean restoration. Later that morning, she walked to the village, stopping to chat with neighbors who now greeted her warmly as one of their own. The fight had brought them closer, old grudges melting away in the warmth of a shared cause. Amelia stopped in at the cafe, sharing a quiet tea with Mrs. Denby, whose hands trembled only slightly as she poured. "Did we do enough?" Amelia whispered, staring at the steam rising from her cup. Mrs. Denby looked at her, eyes bright and unwavering. "We did what was right, love. Sometimes that's the only thing you can do." The words echoed in Amelia's mind as she returned to the manor. In her study, she flipped through her grandmother's journals, searching for answers. She lingered over an old passage. "To guard a secret, you must be willing to let it go. To love a place, you must set it free." She closed the book, heart aching. Was her need to save the deer really about the animals, or about her own need to hold on, to belong, to make up for the losses in her own life? She realized then, true guardianship was not about possession or even victory. It was about respect, about knowing when to fight and when to stand back and trust the land to heal itself. Days passed, each one quieter than the last. The internet's attention drifted elsewhere. The news crews packed up, and the council slipped into silence, avoiding Fletcher and his threats. For the villagers, life resumed its old rhythms: fields to tend, shops to run, children to teach. But there was a difference, a subtle pride in the way they greeted each other, in the way children played in the lanes, no longer looking over their shoulders for strangers or construction trucks. One afternoon, Dr. Thomas Langley returned for a visit. He and Amelia walked the forest's edge, binoculars in hand, searching for signs of the white deer. They found little, a distant flash of white through the trees, a cluster of tracks by a mossy stream. "They're doing what wild things do," Thomas said softly. "When pressured, they disappear. They find safety in silence. Maybe that's the lesson, too." Amelia nodded, understanding blooming quietly inside her. "The world isn't ours to control," she murmured. "Only to cherish for as long as we're able." She and Thomas discussed plans for long-term stewardship, a true partnership between the village, the National Trust, and conservationists. Amelia wanted to involve the school children, to teach them not just the names of the animals and plants, but the meaning of responsibility. That heritage was not a birthright, but a duty. At the next village meeting, Amelia stood and shared these thoughts. She spoke quietly, but every eye in the old hall watched her. "We fought so hard to keep this forest safe, but it isn't really ours, not mine, not yours, not anyone's. Our job is to care for it, to respect it, and to accept that sometimes the best thing we can do is give it space. Let it breathe. Let it be wild." A ripple of understanding passed through the room. Some nodded, others smiled, a few brushed away tears. Reginald, cane in hand, added in his gravelly voice, "Our greatest legacy is what we choose not to take." As days turned to weeks, the white deer remained hidden, but hope lingered. New green shoots broke through the forest floor, birds returned to rebuilt nests, and the scars of trampling and construction slowly faded. The land healed, slowly, imperfectly, but surely. Amelia began to write again, this time not as a campaigner but as a witness and teacher. She published articles about the fight for Yorkshire's woods, not as a tale of villains and heroes, but as a reminder that in the modern world, every community faces its own version of this struggle. The lesson, she realized, was not only about the deer or the land or the past. It was about learning to value what cannot be owned, to find strength in unity, and to embrace the humility that true stewardship demands. She often thought about the villagers, now bound together by more than geography or old stories. Their courage had given her the strength to confront her own fears, to forgive old wounds, and to see herself as part of something larger. In saving the forest, they had saved a piece of each other. And always she remembered her grandmother's words. Everyone has a forest to protect, whether it's a patch of earth, a family, a dream. And sometimes, the bravest thing you can do is to let it go, trusting that what you've loved will find its own way. One evening, as the sun slipped behind the hills, Amelia stood at the edge of the woods, listening. In the hush, she heard a soft, distant rustle, perhaps the white deer, moving safely in the deep wild. She smiled, the ache in her chest softer now, filled with hope and hard-won wisdom. Months passed. The wildflowers returned to the forest floor, bluebells and primroses peeking through leaf litter in the gentle spring sunlight. The manor's stone walls, once battered by storms of both nature and conflict, glowed warm in the mornings, as if the land itself was breathing a sigh of relief. Life in the village regained its measured rhythm. Planting, tending, teaching, gathering, woven now with a sense of shared purpose that had not existed before. Amelia found herself changed as well. She no longer felt like a visitor in her own home or a fugitive from her past life. The bruises of the divorce faded, replaced by quiet resilience. There was peace in knowing that she did not have to win every fight to honor her family, her name, or the place that had raised her. She embraced her new role, not just as a guardian of Blackwood land, but as a teacher, a bridge between past and future. She accepted an invitation to guest lecture at the local university in York, speaking about conservation, community action, and the lessons learned from Yorkshire's fight. Her words were direct and unsparing, but never bitter. What we inherit, she told a room of bright-eyed students, is not just property, titles, or even land. It's the responsibility to care for what's fragile and fleeting. In an age obsessed with ownership, the bravest act is sometimes to step back, to let go, and to trust that what we love can exist beyond our control. She shared the story of the white deer, of the villagers' unity, and of the pain that comes with change. She spoke honestly about mistakes, about her urge to protect the herd by keeping secrets, and how real stewardship sometimes means allowing others to participate, to learn, to make their own mistakes. The students listened, scribbling notes. Some stayed behind after class, full of questions and hope. Back in Yorkshire, Amelia turned her field notes and photographs into a book. It was not a memoir of triumph, but a collection of reflections and lessons on humility, on loss, and on the power of a community united by care rather than profit. Reginald wrote the foreword, a gentle meditation on heritage and responsibility, and Mrs. Denby contributed recipes for the scones and stews that had comforted countless weary souls. Fletcher, predictably, tried to reignite his campaign through slick PR and new partnerships, but the community was wary now, their trust hard-won, their vigilance keen. Olivia Grant's career took a sharp turn. After her failed livestream and the backlash from her followers, she pivoted to documenting real conservation stories, at last using her influence to elevate, not exploit. One afternoon, Amelia received a letter from her ex-husband. It was brief, formal, but not unkind. He had agreed to drop his claim on the manor and land, recognizing that what bound him to the place was not property or profit, but a chapter of his life that was finally closed. She felt a gentle release. No anger, no regret, just acceptance. Spring turned to summer. School children from the village visited the woods, led by Amelia, Thomas Langley, and local teachers. The children learned to spot birds, track deer prints, and recognize wildflowers. They listened to stories about the protests, about the people who stood together for something larger than themselves. Some of the older students wrote essays, others painted murals on the school walls, reminders to future generations that their home was a gift, not a commodity. Amelia sometimes returned alone to the edge of the forest, camera hanging at her side. She no longer looked for the white deer. She simply listened to the symphony of birds and the wind in the branches, finding joy in what remained unseen, unknown, untamed. She understood now that the greatest happiness came not from possession, but from letting go, from allowing space for wildness, for mystery, for hope. In late August, the village gathered for a celebration on the green. Music, laughter, long tables laden with food. Reginald raised a glass in a quiet toast. To the land, to the living, and to the wisdom that comes when we listen. The crowd cheered, but Amelia felt the real victory was quieter. The renewed sense of connection, the unspoken understanding that they were all temporary stewards, part of a legacy that stretched back before any deed or title. Afterward, Amelia lingered as the sun dipped behind the hills, the light gilding every stone and leaf. She found herself thinking about her grandmother, about the generations who had walked these fields and forests, each facing their own trials. She thought of the lessons Yorkshire had given her, about courage, humility, and the true meaning of home. She realized then that the story was not about winning or losing, about heroes or villains, but about learning to belong to a place by caring for it, by letting it be what it was meant to be. She remembered the words she'd once doubted, now written in her own hand. Protect your inheritance, not to own, but so that it may exist in freedom. To truly love a place is to let it grow beyond you. As the stars blinked into being above the Dales, Amelia walked the quiet path back to the manor, hope warm in her heart. She did not know what challenges would come next. New threats, new storms, new joys, but she no longer feared the unknown. Her home, her land, her story, none belonged to her alone. She was, at last, part of something enduring, something wild and free. And so the true inheritance lived on, in the hearts and hands of all who cared enough to let it.